And we are live. And so I will comment too that we're now on cancel. we had some technical difficulties with time zones, because time zones are always a lot of fun. And so, but we're here now. So hi. Welcome to the channel. I, of course, am Nico from Niko's Book Reviews, and I have with me here Nathan Allen, who is an author, illustrator, and works in animation as well. His debut novel, The Heretic, is also out here now. Well, welcome. I'm glad you were able to make it.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I appreciate you being patient with me with my time zone confusions. As I was talking to Nico about it, I work on California time. I live in Utah, and then I was dealing with Nico. It sounds like you're in a different time zone as well. So I got my wires crossed there.
I'm in Central, but at least you're not. I was gonna say Arizona, I know, has they don't do daylight savings,
That's
so
right.
trying to convert to Arizona time is always extra
Even
weird.
more confusing.
So I had a work meeting like that once where I missed a call with the client because I was doing mountain time. They're like, no, we're Arizona time. It's different. And I'm like, what? So it happens. It happens. But yes. Okay. So, oh, I was saying Heidi thought I was joking when I said we were uncanceled. So she had been here in the chat, so I pinged her just to let her know. No, we are uncanceled. Yeah, just time zone issues. But yeah, so I figured, it made sense to have you on as one of my first guests here, because you had actually reached out specifically and asked about interviews, and I'm like, I always mean to do more of have somebody on, just kind of chat, have a conversation type of show. And I'd meant to start one for so long. And so it still took me, I don't know how many months, but it was definitely still months. But I'm finally like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And so I made sure, I'm like, Nathan Allen is getting first billing as first author to be on. So it's a new show, at least. So technical difficulties, I suppose, make a little bit of sense. But it can always happen. It can always happen, for sure.
Oh, it's good to be here, and I appreciate being one of the first. That's fun.
Yeah. So do you want to do kind of just like an introduction? You've got a lot of interesting stuff you're involved in here. So just tell everybody a little about you and your writing, illustrating, animating, and anything you want to talk about.
Sure. So yeah, as you did a good introduction there. I recently published my debut novel. This is The Heretic. And it's probably hard to see in the camera, but I did illustrate the cover myself. That was something I was kind of excited about doing because my background is in art, and my day job is animating. So I work under Disney at Lucasfilm, making cartoon Star Wars TV shows. So if you've seen Clone Wars, Bad Batch, Tales of the Empire, Resistance, there's so many different shows. I've worked on a lot of those, pretty much all of them.
I know. I haven't seen all of those, but I know the Clone Wars is the really big popular one that everybody loved. So still immediately that's really cool. Especially, it sounds like from your bio that you were a big fan of Star Wars growing up too. So I imagine this got to be pretty cool getting to work on something that you loved growing up.
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of a fun thing because Clone Wars actually, it is very popular, and there were 6 seasons released, and then Disney bought Lucasfilm, and so they kind of canceled the rest of it. And then years later, actually, after I started working on Lucasfilm, they initiated it, and we did season 7. So I was able to work on Clone Wars, which was fun because I'd kind of grown up watching it as well. So just like you're saying, it was fun to be a fan, and then also to be involved later on with producing it.
Yeah, that's definitely something that most people probably don't get to do, something like that. So that's super cool. And I think you're also the first the person working in animation that I've ever talked to on the channel in general too. So it's pretty cool. So I've more so had the authors being the channel it is, but
sure,
we'll definitely talk about writing too. So with the book, what made you want to go out there and write a book and kind of work in that medium?
Yeah, so in animation, there's a lot of creative stuff you do at work or in your career, which I do a lot of that, and it's a lot of fun. But also, you don't have always the control over everything you do. So maybe I'm working on a lightsaber or as a character or a spaceship, but then the director or the art director has a certain vision, kind of guides you, which is great, and it's fun to be in that collaborative environment. But it's also really fun to have kind of an outlet where you're in total control. And so I was kind of looking for that as a creative. And I started a web comic. And as I was writing and working on that, I realized that I actually just really enjoyed writing. And so I kind of went away from the drawing, which is interesting. Maybe it's because that's what I do at work a lot of the time. But I just found that I really enjoyed writing and kind of pursued that avenue for my own personal project.
Yeah. It's one of those things. It's always interesting hearing where people go with it too. And so it's yeah, I mean, a really different, like how different is it just creative wise with doing like the writing or versus different types of art? Because I know they're obviously two different things, but do you feel like there are any similarities, or does it feel like a totally separate process?
That's a great question. I mean, there are so many differences, but a lot of core similarities. So when you're working with story, there's a lot of things that kind of hold true between mediums. There's a pretty popular book called Save the Cat, Save the Cat, which is kind of a screenwriting book. But I know a lot of people also like to take information from that for just kind of book writing. And that's a good example of kind of how like there's overlap, I think, between mediums. Now there's differences too when you're writing a script versus writing a book. But I've really enjoyed seeing the similarities and kind of leveraging some of my experience or time in the kind of the visual entertainment industry and bringing that to the written book world. So differences, but it's fun to kind of learn those too.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I always am just, in awe of people who can do a lot of those creative things, because I don't think I could ever sit down and write a book. And I also I've seen like some stuff about what it takes going into like animating or things too. And I'm just like, man, I don't think I'd ever have the patience, let alone the skill. But like if I magically had the skill, I still don't know if I would have the patience to do a lot of that stuff. So it's yeah, I mean, props to you for being able to do lots of cool stuff in multiple creative areas. That's really awesome.
Well, thank you.
So the Heretic, I know. So it is following the character who has just the one arm, which always interesting, like a different twist on a character as well too. Was that coming from a specific inspiration that you decided to go with a character like that?
That's a great question. There's a lot of different things in kind of the journey of writing this book that happened along the way. So it wasn't always part of my initial idea, but as I've kind of developed this character, I wanted them to be different and have a different view on the world around them and different experiences than maybe a lot of the characters around them. And having only one arm was a way to kind of give them an interesting perspective. One thing with that is I know in a lot of fantasy or fiction, when a character loses an arm or something like that, they can get it replaced either like technologically or magically or whatever. And that's something that I really, at first I kind of messed around with that idea in my comic, but I decided that that's something I didn't want to do. I wanted this character to always only have one arm. And that's because they're a good character as they are. They don't have to change that aspect. There's other things that they're growing and developing, but kind of who they are physically isn't something that needed to change. And I thought that was kind of a fun way to kind of continue the idea of their unique perspective of the world.
I'm thinking about it now, and there are quite a few books I can think of where like a character loses a hand or an arm, and it's either magically or scientifically like regrown very quickly. That's actually I wouldn't have thought about how common that actually kind of is, but yeah, I can think of several examples. So the one I'm thinking of that's not is Wheel of Time.
That's the one I thought of too, but that's also a little bit later on in the series. But yeah, that is one of the few where he doesn't get another arm.
I was going to say, I didn't say a character, so I suppose that's not spoilers, but I feel like if somebody's watching the channel, they're probably have heard me talking about the Wheel of Time a million times. So it's probably okay at this point.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. They all lose one arm. Yeah, all the characters do.
Every single character in the Wheel of Time at some point loses an arm. So, and we got Mike Molman in the house here too. So
howdy.
I think we've just jumped up a little bit. I think people have now realized
that here,
so that's good. Mike, all the books are over 500 pages, so you would not care for it. Mike won't read anything over 500 pages is his rule. They just, those books, they don't exist. So probably helps get more reading done for sure. So I'm just waiting for him to write a book that's over 500 pages though, because then I'm going to tell him I can't read it just on principle. But so far they're all under 500 pages, so they're still technically okay.
That's kind of cool though too. It's fun to. Some of my favorite books are also novellas or shorter, and I think it takes an impressive amount of skill to boil everything down to just getting like the essential and the pure story.
It is interesting because I used to be somebody that I would just say that like I don't really like short work or short stories or novellas nearly as much. And granted, some of it's because I read some that I just didn't care for, or maybe that weren't that good. But more and more, I've discovered that there are a lot of good ones, and yeah, it is impressive to be able to write something shorter and still be able to like really pack it in. And so some authors I've really liked, I've read some of their short stories, novellas, and I'm like, oh, these are really good. And like I just read a novella, Rose House by Arkady Martine, which I knew like nothing about. It would look short, and I picked it up at the library because I need short books in my life sometimes. That was pretty good too. My wife has showed up. I do my favorite books. If I read them out loud to her, she will fall asleep. So it helps her sleep if she can't. So we have very different reading tastes.
I also love long books too, and series, which can be long books put together, right? So
it's true. Well, speaking of long books, so I did see on your Goodreads that you're reading the Dragonbone Share.
I started it. So I have Libby, which is where I read or listen to a number of books, and unfortunately it lapsed before I finished. So I have not finished it, but I have been reading the Dragonbone Share. I need to wait till it comes back around for my my time to check out from the library. But
oh, gotcha. I said, good, bad. Where are you going? I've heard mixed.
I'm feeling mixed right now. I'm curious to see where it goes. It feels a little bit more like an older style book in terms of where like there's a lot going on and you may not know how it all connects or the kind of build up to the story. So I'm not sure. I'm definitely going to hold off on real opinions until I finish it, but yeah, we'll see.
I won't yell at you even if we disagree, but it is one of my favorite series. But also I quite recently was invited to a live stream for book 2 because there was a buddy read group and they were all having a terrible time and they needed somebody who liked it to like try to talk them off the ledge. So like totally fine with differing opinions, but I love it. And it is very classic kind of style. And Tad Williams' prose is really good. But he can also be a bit slow. And so sometimes people just aren't a huge fan. But it's, if you like the style, it's a really good example of classic stuff done right. And the follow-up trilogy is 4-book trilogy, but Tad Williams can't write an actual trilogy to save his life. But
quadrilogy.
He admits it. I had him on the channel and he joked, but he always goes long. And that's where like Memories of Sauron is technically a trilogy in the original hardcover, but it got split later, and so it's kind of 4 books. And of course the new one was supposed to be a trilogy, and it turned into 4 books and 2 novellas as well. So there's always more. But
that's fun. I'll have to keep reading it and let you know what I think when I finish.
Well, yeah, definitely let me know. So I'm always curious, and even if you don't, like I said, it's totally okay.
That's something I actually see a lot working on Star Wars stuff all the time. There's always opinions in terms of what people enjoy, what they don't, and maybe people enjoy part of it and they really don't like the other parts because it's not what they envision. And so, and I super respect that, and I've just seen a lot of that. So everyone has their own preferences and tastes.
Oh, for sure. And I always try to be super understanding. A lot of my favorite books and series are ones that are not necessarily stuff that everyone's going to enjoy for one reason or another. So I have a lot of, and some of them are at least like are fairly popular, but you know, like we talked about the Wheel of Time, like a lot of people love that, but a lot of people hate it. And I feel like there's valid reasons for both. Nobody complains about the Wheel of Time quite as much as like a super fan of the Wheel of Time. We all complain so much about it. And so it's it's all good. But
and there's like funny I don't know, memes that crop up with it too, with certain shared annoyances or something like that. But yeah, fans, people that like something more often also have the most critique as well. Yeah,
for sure. I don't know if she's referring to. Have you read any of the Star Wars books?
I've read some. I need to read more. There's a lot out there, and it's interesting too with what Disney's done in terms of there's like the, what do they call it? I don't know, like the official universe or canon, and then there's like the extended universe. I've only read some.
A lot out, didn't they?
Yeah, they try to make it. Yeah, I can't remember. I think George Lucas even had like, I don't know if he had like different distinctions of it or not. I'm not sure on that, but there's a lot out there. I've read some books, some Star Wars books, and I've read some the comics as well. There's different Star Wars comics out there, but definitely not nearly as many as there are. There's a ton that I haven't read. Yeah, I've also found the more I've worked at Lucasfilm, honestly, the less Star Wars I do or read or watch.
I feel like that's fair because it'd make it feel like work, you know. I feel like that is totally fair. It's just kind of one of those things where that's where I always have to be really careful because, granted, I mean, it's not like I get paid to review books on the internet, but like that's where I try to be careful where like I'm not reading a bunch of stuff that feeling obligated because I don't want reading to feel like work because it's my hobby and it's like one of my only hobbies. So I need it to stay enjoyable. But yeah, it's with the Star Wars stuff because I do want to try some of them because I've heard really good things about certain of the books. And like I know David Farland, who wrote, I think he wrote it under Dave Wolverton. He wrote some Star Wars books, and I've read his other series, The Rune Lords, that I really liked. So I'd be curious. But my experience with the Star Wars books is I read some random ones when I was a kid, and the quality was very mixed. Because I feel like back in the day, everything got greenlit. But I read it was a Star Wars book, and one of the plot lines was the new bad guy. When there were two people with three eyes. One of them was Tricolus and one of them was Triclops because there was some prophecy about having three eyes. They didn't know which one was going to be which. But the bad guy was trying to find Darth Vader's glove because apparently that's actually how he was able to force choke people. It wasn't with the force, it's something with the glove. And then like Han and Leia get married and go spelunking for their honeymoon, and weird details that I remember from like 20 years ago when I read this, but it was apparently stuck with me. So I don't know. There was some odd stuff, but I've heard there's some really good stuff too. But
I think there's a lot of Star Wars content out there, and there's always, I mean, like even in the film world, you know, there's some pretty famous ones. Like there's the Christmas special, or there's different Ewok adventures. Like so, there's interesting corners, and you can find just about anything if you look for Star Wars, any quality or any facet.
It's, you know, especially something that's been around so long. There's so many different pieces, so there's a lot of stuff there with it. So as you mentioned comics a couple times, so it sounds like you both read and possibly were writing a comic.
So I actually don't read that many comics. It's mostly like I've read some web comics, and then I read some Star Wars comics as well. Trying to think, I've read many other things. I'm in a book club at work, and occasionally we'll do a comic or a graphic novel here or there, and that's kind of fun. But I wouldn't say I'm like a connoisseur of graphic novels by any means.
I gotcha.
But I did start my entrance to the writing world start off as a graphic novel or a web comic, and so I was drawing as well as writing, or at least the dialogue parts of it at first, and then transitioned to drawing like one image and doing chunks of text, and then I just did chunks of text, kind of transitioned to full writing. But yeah, that's how I started with writing.
It kind of makes sense, just, you know, especially when you're coming from illustrating and animation, and so, you know, comics are letting you kind of dip the toe in. That I could definitely see that. But for some reason, I've just never been able to get into comics or graphic novels. It's just the medium just does not work for me. And like, there's definitely some that I think would be fun to try, but every time I try, I'm just like, nah. So that's where it's always interesting. I know some people like absolutely love, some people don't, and then it sounds like you're just kind of in the middle where you're like, yeah, you're totally fine with it, not super in. So just curious.
Yeah, that is. I guess I'm just in the middle.
But it's probably good that I don't really read comics, because if I had to add more stuff that I need to get to eventually, my TBR is already a mountain. So
I get the mountainous TBR, and that's how I feel about certain other hobbies as well. Where it's like, oh, this could be cool, and then I'm like, I need to not bring a whole other wave of stuff to do, new TBR type things. You do have a beautiful wall of books behind you. I'm assuming a lot of those aren't your TBRs, but your past reads.
Most of what you can see is, yes, I have been working really hard over like the last year and a half to read more of what I own, because I do own way too many unread books as well. But I try to put like my favorite stuff higher up with like a nicer place. So most of what's like here is stuff that I've read and really enjoyed, but there's probably a few things here and there. Like this one. I've meant to read that book for like 2 years and I haven't gotten to it. I'm sorry, Tiago. Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of them, but yeah, it's I started really collecting books only like a few years ago, and starting on BookTube has absolutely made it so much worse when I started buying stuff. But just slowly over time, I've been able to collect my favorites, but I've also read and found so many new favorites, and so it's always a fun time. But you get the real background too, because I do have a fake background, which is also the bookshelf. So this is the fake background.
Oh, is it just like a higher angle of it?
And then and then here's the real. So it sometimes, if I don't feel like actually setting everything up, and I just use the laptop, just put the fake one on. But yeah, I just randomly took that. So that's my backup background. Oh man. So besides like all of the creative stuff, any other big hobbies or anything?
I mean, it's interesting because the creative stuff, that was always kind of my hobby growing up and different things, and now professionally, because that's what I do. People ask me, what do you do for fun? And I'm like, well, I guess it's like I just do my job for fun on my own, kind of. But yeah, so writing is kind of one of my hobbies, and then I used to really love building Lego, which is always kind of an interesting one to say, and I still love it, but I just never get to it anymore. It's I guess further down my list of things, but I like building things. So Lego, I'll do projects around the house where I put things together or whatever, build desks or something.
So I need to just invite you over to put together all the furniture is what I'm hearing. So
sure.
I always get roped into that, but if you ever like decide you need to moonlight, you can do the TaskRabbit thing and just put together IKEA furniture for people.
That's right.
That's a real thing that I've never paid anybody to put furniture together, but it's also not my favorite thing to do either.
That's fair. Probably can't see. This is my office. I share it with my wife, so we're actually seeing her desk behind us. But let's see. Maybe this is risky. We'll give it a try. But yeah, I built this desk. Small show and tell, I guess. So this whole desk back here that kind of wraps around and it comes down to me.
Oh,
that's a desk, and then
nice.
That's a big fireplace. Shoo, I don't even see that I built in the room, but do some stuff with wood and whatnot. Now my camera's gonna be all messed up. Let's see if I can.
It's all good. It looks like a beautiful office. So
it's been fun.
Yeah. My office now is, because my old office became the nursery. I have a just over 1-year-old at home, and so now my office is like one corner of our guest room. You just can't tell when we're just looking at this angle for all the books, but I say the fireplace too, especially a nice touch. I'm a big fan of fireplaces.
They're fun. They're a fun kind of ambiance.
Yeah, but that's I mean, with work and then writing and everything too, I suppose that probably takes up a lot of time as well, just with it. Um, do you have? I think the series is going to be a trilogy. I think, right? Runes
Yep,
and Ruin.
that is correct.
Any? Do you know when book 2 is going to be coming out?
My goal is to release it at the end of 2026. So I'm just about to leave the outlining phase. I get really detailed in outlining, so I have like dialogue and all this kind of stuff. So it's pretty fleshed out in that regards. But then really putting it together with the right prose and everything is the next step, and do a round of beta readers and stuff like that. So yeah, before the end of 2026.
Okay.
About a year and a half from now, I guess.
Yeah. So you're the big outlining type. It's always interesting seeing how different authors approach too, because I know some people just kind of go in and do it. Some people the big of the outline.
Yeah, that is definitely something that it's interesting to learn, kind of figure out what I was, but that is definitely what I gravitate towards and am most effective with.
I feel like if I ever wrote something, it would probably have to be that, because I've multiple times in my life I've just like sat down and started randomly writing something, but then I absolutely lose focus and I'm like, I don't know where this is going. So I'm like, maybe if I ever actually try to get serious about writing a book, I'll just try to really outline. But I'd probably turn into the person with like the extensive outline and like world building that never ends up writing anything, 'cause you just spend years doing that. That I could see. So
It's interesting
um,
because yeah, there is a learning to outlining as well, because you can spend a lot of time writing not book stuff. So kind of figuring out how to do it to the book is interesting and fun.
yeah. There's so much that goes into writing, especially as when you're an independent author as well, and you kind of have to be in charge of everything. How is it managing that kind of the whole process from start to finish like that?
That's a great question. I've definitely learned a lot. So we talked about The Heretic as my debut novel. So I've definitely been learning more about kind of, marketing, publicity, all the other sides, whether it's like getting, editors, and I'm starting to learn more about narrators and stuff like that, because I'm looking to get an audio version of it eventually, hopefully soonish out. So there's been a lot of interesting things to learn about all that. And it is a lot for kind of one person, because if you're self-published and all that kind of stuff to do. But it's also really cool just to learn more about the wider industry and kind of what goes into all those facets and details.
Yeah. It's always I've talked to lots of authors that have self-published and some that have traditionally published as well too, and it's just always interesting hearing what everybody's take there is too, because there really is a lot, there's just so much that goes into it, and I feel like when you're on just like the outside, you don't always necessarily realize all of the work that goes into just even a single book. And then when you add in things like you, at least, yeah, with you designing the cover and doing the cover, that at least takes one step out here too, because I've talked to people too where trying to find cover artists and things like that can also be an adventure. But yeah, narrator is another big one. So there are definitely a lot of people that prefer audio, and it's really popular these days. So usually good to have. I was a very late audio convert myself, but now I don't know how I could live without it, because it makes uh, getting reading in when I can't actually just sit down and read possible. And so I get a lot of
Totally.
my time driving to and from work, or like walking, or like mowing the lawn, things like that. So
That's totally how I am now. I feel like 80% of, at least, of my book absorption is through audio as opposed to reading, just like you said, because of multitasking.
yeah, Mike's a
Yeah.
fan as well here, but
Plus, you get to listen to
it,
people who have amazing reading, uh, whether it's voices or whatever. They do a great job. That could be a lot of fun.
for sure. That's where it's always interesting too, because I tend to, like, if I'm reading something, I've especially started because I've been like practicing reading out loud in fun voices for my daughter, and like once she's old enough to appreciate it, I want to my goal is to get her to like all of my kind of books by making them fun and doing weird voices and stuff. So I've been practicing a lot, and so now anytime I pick up a book and I start reading it, I start narrating it in my head with like assigning whatever voice makes sense. And so it's kind of a fun little thing I started doing. And I didn't even realize I was doing it at first, but I just was like making like a split second decision like that. This is the voice that we're reading this book in, and going from there. So it's
That's super
been,
fun.
it's been fun to do, yeah. And there are some amazing narrators out there as well, and that really just up the enjoyment of a book sometimes too, if you have a really good one.
Yeah, they can add a lot. I think that's super cool that you're sharing. You have a plan. You're currently sharing books with your daughter, but you also have a plan to like introduce the things that you love, which I think is super fun. I definitely have plans like that and goals with my young children as well. Like I got to make sure they like this or that. My oldest is 4, and I've gotten him to like spaceships, and I build Lego with him and stuff. So it's well on the way to the things that I like.
That's yeah. I feel like that's you gotta get and hopefully, like, I don't know if my daughter will end up liking fantasy books, but I'm gonna try to make them fun at least. So it's that's what we've joked. Like, is she gonna grow up to like the stuff I do or the stuff my wife does? And so we'll have to see. But she does love her books. She's constantly grabbing the same books over and over and over again. So that's where I try to read her some of something that I might be reading within reason, just to like read out loud, because I'm like, I don't always want to read the same like 4-page book over and over and over again. At some point, it's a little bit much to keep doing that. So
Totally.
I end up doing it anyway most of the time. I'm sure you know all about that too. So,
a lot of little books memorized for sure.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
We have 3 kids. Yep.
3 kids. Oh God, and
2
4 at
boys
the
and a
oldest.
girl. Yep. So yeah, they're kind of close together.
I cannot imagine. The one is plenty for me and quite the handful. So props to you for managing that. That I'm sure there's lots of fun with it too, but it's got to be challenging at the same time. So
it is a lot of fun. And yeah, there's challenges to everything in life, but that also helps you love things. I feel like sometimes what you put effort into and what is challenging also makes it more rewarding, and that definitely works for writing. But also, I think it is for the people you care about.
Yeah, I would say that's a good just like life lesson there anyway for applying to anything. So very well said. Very well said.
Thank you.
We're dropping life lessons here on the stream. So. You never know what you're gonna get. That's all.
That's be kind of scary. Just pulling someone on and be like, let's see what they say.
I should start now. Be like, what's your life lesson? What's your message to the world? And just throw people on the spot. So
that'd be so hard.
I'm not that mean. I am going to. I suppose maybe I'll just tell you now. I am going to put you on the spot at some point later in the stream and ask you to recommend a book to everybody. So I meant to do that in the first one, and I completely forgot. So I was going to try to remember to do it in this one.
Sure.
You now have some forewarning at least, so you can think about it. But as I'm still some of it's still figuring out the format. I'm still not 100% sold on the name of this either, being Book Chats and Beyond. But that's what I came up with at the time, and nobody in the chat suggested a new name, so that meant they were complicit in the name.
It's not all on your shoulders. It was shared.
I'm blaming my audience. So I tried to put the end on them, and they didn't respond. So they must not think it's too bad. So, but it's better than like Bodie McBoatface. So sometimes when you ask an audience to name something, you never know.
Yeah. Interview face. I don't know how you say that.
It's sort of like, I don't know. It doesn't quite translate, but so what are you reading or listening to now?
Right now I am reading. Oh, what is the name of the series? The Ancillary. I want to say, is it the Ancillary series by Anne Leckie? I'm listening to Ancillary Sword. It's the kind of the AI spaceship book. Have you heard of this or read it?
Ancillary Justice, is that one of them?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah,
that's the first one.
It sounds familiar. Okay, I have not read it. I've heard it's very good though. I know I think that's on my list. My never-ending list to get to.
I've enjoyed it. I'm not sure if it's my favorite or not, but it's it's definitely good enough for me to keep going in the series. So that's been a lot of fun.
That's always a good sign. So if you the first book doesn't make you want to continue, it's not the best. So
then it's not your fit. Yeah, totally. I've definitely read first books and not read the rest of the series before.
Oh, it's not in my want to read list on Goodreads. Well, it is now. I was gonna say that one I know I've at least heard about, but I'm not the best read in sci-fi, and so I'm trying to do a little bit more sci-fi and mix around in different genres because I've
Same
been
with me, actually.
primarily fantasy.
I'm pushing that direction more as well. So what are you reading right now?
So I am reading Brightness Long Ago by Guy Gabriel Kay, which is his stuff's kind of historical fantasy. I don't know if you've read Nikkei, but it is. It's very good. He's another one that a really great author, but it's kind of depend on the reader because some people find his stuff super boring, and like I love it, and it's really great writing. It's always like a historical twist. And that type of thing, but there's a lot of similarities to his books, or like sometimes he'll explore similar themes or do different things, but he just does them so well. And so it's I'm really enjoying it. And then I don't know what I'm going to read next. Actually, I have a couple of random books from the library. I've started. I take my daughter to the library a lot because she likes looking at all the books for some reason, so it kind of works. And so I've started grabbing random stuff again, which is nice because then I'm not actually spending money buying random books. So that's the positive thing. I've been appreciating the library more. That's where the other one I mentioned, Rose House, which I had never even heard of. It's the same person who wrote. Now I'm drawing a blank on what it is, but it was a really popular book. What's it called? If I Google her name, it'll come up. A Memory Called Empire. That's what it was.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's that author. Not that. I also own that book. Have not read that book. But she wrote some novella about an AI house. That was what I read, which was interesting. So Mike says Vermilion Flames by Alex Fernandez, which he says is sci-fi. So I have not heard of that one. Apparently I got to look it up. This is why I'm always adding way too many books, because people are always recommending books.
Well, that's super fun though. Yeah, like I mentioned I was in a book club, or I am in a book club, and it's fun to hear what other people are reading, and I add them to my TBR list, and then like you with the library, I just do it through Libby, and so it's like whatever comes in next, we'll see how long the wait is or whatnot, but it's fun.
I say I definitely use some Libby as well. That's where I've gotten. It just kind of depends what they have. My library is a little bit hit or miss, but they do happen to have a surprisingly decent selection of miscellaneous older fantasy books, which is a big niche of mine. I like my miscellaneous older fantasies, so sometimes they have pretty good selection of that kind of stuff, which works out. So Heidi says just read 2 robot dystopian books, Service Model and Mockingbird. Service Model is Tchaikovsky. I don't think I know Mockingbird. I also literally sitting right over there, I have Saturation Point, I think, which is another one of his novellas. But he's got a ton of novellas. I haven't read his full-length stuff yet, but
I've read his full length. I've really liked it, but I need to read the novellas. So
we're the opposite side. I've started with some of those, but as the novellas I've done are pretty good so far. I'm curious to read. I have Shards of Earth, I think, might be the one, but I have at least one of his books, for sure. But yeah, it's always fun. I am reading a secret book right now too. I've been working on a secret project that where I can't tell anybody what the books I'm reading, but it's been interesting because I keep wanting to talk about the books that I'm reading, and I can't. I'm not used to that, so doing it all for the video where I get to be like, I read secret books. Well, and hopefully people will find it fun. Otherwise, I did it for nothing. But
it's always interesting keeping secrets. I remember one of my challenges as a creator, as an artist, like drawing artist, or as a writer, is not inundating people with updates, like my family. So it's like, oh, here's the next pass at this drawing or the next chapter. Sometimes releasing things too frequently on the same thing can be annoying. So I find that I had to like go into not talk about it a ton. And then I remember when I kind of shared my finished book with my family, they were like, what? Because it was kind of a secret for a while. So, but I think that can be fun. So it'll be cool to see you. I'm curious what it is now.
As I say, I've mentioned very little about it so far, just because I feel like if I say too much, then I'll reveal. But I'm like 60% through, maybe 70% through. I don't know. I'm getting closer to finishing what I need to finish before I can do the video. So that's all I'll say. If I tell any more, no. So what's your favorite thing that you've ended up reading because of the book club?
Ooh, so we've talked about doing. I'm more into fantasy, is my own personal realm. But in the book club, we have done a good amount of science fiction, and so that's been kind of fun. One of the things I've read was Murderbot, and that one was a lot of fun. Kind of getting to read that. I guess it's a series. It was started off as novellas, and those were a lot of fun. And then there was a full length book release. But yeah, that was a good one.
I did the first one. I did think it was kind of fun. I haven't continued yet. I know some people are like that really blew up, so it's been popular. And there's that show now too.
Oh yeah, it did release something.
I don't have the Apple TV, so I won't end up watching it. But apparently the show's supposed to be good too. But that's that one I remember like really blowing up.
Yeah, there's been a lot of books in book club that I probably wouldn't have found on my own that have been really enjoyable. And they're not always total hits for me, but I've been in that book club, I don't know how many, 5 years more. Every time we bring it up in the book club, like how old it is, it's always like, what? It's crazy. But it's fun. It's a genre fiction, so you're generally choosing fantasy, science fiction, maybe some thrillers, stuff like that. But
so now, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but now I'm curious what the worst book that you've read is the book club
from book club.
If you feel comfortable.
That's an interesting question. The thing is, I feel like my reading habits have changed. I used to finish everything I started, and now I definitely don't do that. So probably the worst thing I read in my preference in the book club, I didn't finish. And so it doesn't really occupy enough of my mind to remember it. Yeah, so I can't even really think. And I don't want to insult people, or because everyone has their favorites
and that's
stuff like that.
100% understand. That's why I say you don't have to answer if you don't want to. So
here's one.
I'm not going to force you into hot takes.
I got this one. So this is one that a number of people in the book club liked, and I could understand that. But it's not that I hated it, but there's a book called Sorcery of Thorns, that a lot of people liked, and to me it was very similar to Bartimaeus. I don't know if anyone's heard of that series. And so it kind of bothered me by the similarities. And I really liked Bartimaeus growing up. And so I think the differences, and maybe like, there's some tone differences and other things like that. It just kind of wasn't my favorite. But I read the whole thing, so clearly it wasn't that bad. But that's the closest I'll give you to a hot take.
Okay. I loved Bartimaeus growing up. I actually earlier this year I read the first couple, and they're not as good as I remember them being. They still weren't bad though, even as an adult. But yeah, I remember really enjoying those. So that's fun. I don't think I know that one, but I'm kind of the same way. Sometimes where if something just feels a little bit too similar to something that you've read, I feel like I end up comparing it often unfavorably. So I've had things like that where like I get why people like, but it's just too close to other things, or it just doesn't quite do it for me. And so it's one of those things that I can definitely understand that. So
yeah, I do want to say that's maybe not always fair, because there's so much stuff out there that you will bump into similar things. That doesn't mean that someone like copied it or whatnot, but it is a challenge sometimes as a consumer to not compare things that you think about or care about.
But there's a lot of, especially like some of like the older classic type of fantasy stuff that I like, where people will read it and they'll be like, "Oh, well, this is just like this." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's because this inspired that,
This
and
was
that's why you're
first.
seeing it." But if you read the other thing first, it doesn't always matter, And so it's kind of funny seeing things. I tend to be the fan of like the older things, but but in Dragon Bone Chair, that was highly influential for George R. R. Martin with writing A Song of Ice and Fire. And George R. R. Martin took actual scenes from Dragon Bone Chair and
Oh.
did them in Game of Thrones, but they happen differently. And it's very intentional. He's not like ripping it off. It's like, here's how this would have happened in my book, and super different. And so then it's like sometimes people will be reading this and they're like, this is so weirdly familiar. And then they compare, and if they really like that, so it's it can definitely happen like that sometimes. It's always interesting to see. But I've had that a lot where people will read like an older fantasy book that I like, and like, yeah, I've seen all these elements, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but at the time this was super fresh. Like nobody was doing this at the time. uh so speaking of super fresh though, I feel like we'll loop back and talk a little bit more about the book. Do you want to give kind of a pitch? Because you had some really interesting elements with like the magical engineering and the kind of mix of magic system in there, which I thought was really interesting. But do you want to talk a little bit about that? Give a
Sure.
nice pitch for everyone watching.
Yeah. So the basic pitch, I'll talk about kind of the magic element too. I guess that comes in really nicely. But the book starts off or is centered around a character named Damien, and he is going to kind of a graduate school equivalent, learning magic. Now, in this world, what that means is like writing runes and stuff like that. So think of like engineering, or I kind of like to think of, yeah, runes magic. I like to think of it kind of as like programming. So it's a lot of like written kind of code-esque stuff where you have to figure out and be very explicit about how things work. And in this world, it's very kind of like, it's not like you're a wizard walking around shooting spells. It's like there's these programmers or these engineers that put together magic, and then people can use it, and maybe the people that are using it seem more wizardly or something. But so he's doing that, trying to graduate, and he's trying to graduate so he can get his family out of the slums. And of course, everything goes wrong. His brother is taken away unjustly and kind of conscripted into a military that is very likely to get him killed. And so the main character goes after trying to save his brother, and he has to use his skills as a magic programmer and his other skills kind of as a card player to help get his brother back.
I say magic programmer. Makes it, that sounds really interesting. I didn't even think about it as being like programming. That makes so much sense in retrospect. Thinking about it that way now. So yeah, that's an interesting take on how to kind of do that magic. But
Yeah.
magic systems are always, I think, a fun thing to just explore and do differently. And so that's a cool one. The random thing that I think it kind of reminded me of, even though it's not very similar in any way, but did you ever see that movie In Time? With it was Justin Timberlake was in it, and like people had like counters on their arms.
Oh,
It
I
it
have
wasn't a
seen
very
that.
it wasn't like a very popular movie, I don't think, because it was okay. But that was like, yeah, they had like a certain amount of time on the arm, but I think I randomly thought of that because like you can use like energy to do stuff, and so it's not really the same thing. But that was my
And my
miscellaneous
characters
reference.
have runes written on them sometimes, so I can see that
Yeah,
too. Kind of like, yeah, it's always
that was
fun to
my
see
really
similarities. I remember writing my book or being most of the way through it, and then like I'd read a new book that just come out and been like, oh, look at these similarities. People think I've copied this, but I like wrote it before the book came out. Now they came out before mine, but not before I read it. So it's always interesting to see some similarities. I remember reading um, The Will of the Many and seeing certain similarities and being like, oh, I really like this book, and it has elements that it did better than mine, but but similar elements at different points.
I was gonna say with some of like the energy stuff, I was gonna say, yeah, that makes sense too. With it as well. So that's That's a fun one. That's so what we have saying Damien sounds like a mix of Matt Cawthon and Blood Over Brighthaven, which is a really interesting description. So
any comparison to Matt
yeah.
Cawthon is a positive in my personal opinion. So thank you.
I wasn't as big of a fan of Blood Over Brighthaven, but I do love Matt Cawthon. So it's a half win for me. But
and I did read Blood Over Brighthaven, and I did think about that as well, because there's kind of like the whole typewriting kind of code-esque version of Magic. That was another one that I read after. When did that one even come out? 2023. Oh, so it definitely beat me. But
it was originally self-published, and then it like got redone for a traditional release more recently. I don't remember exactly when. But so that's where it depends when you first heard about it, if it was before or after. But
yeah, I definitely didn't hear about it. I read that one. I think that was that in my book club? But I read that one fairly recently and enjoyed a bit of it. That was fun.
Yeah, I was really popular. I was more in the minority on not being a huge fan of it.
That's fine.
But I think it was well written. I just had my issues with it. But I have a lot of unpopular opinions.
It's good. It's good. That's the thing, though, is opinions. It's whatever you like, So you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer to. You don't have to like it because someone else does, and I appreciate that.
Oh, for sure. I'd say I my video that came out today was another unpopular opinion, and somebody commented, and they were very clearly joking, but they just went into this whole like fake rant, like, how dare you, person I've never met that I watch on the internet, disagree with my opinions. And I was just laughing so hard at it. It was such a fun little mini rant here. So, but you never know. Sometimes people get really grumpy when you disagree. I always find it interesting talking to people who have very wildly different takes on things that I like too. Just because, and sometimes you like really agree with somebody on one thing but totally disagree on another, and so
that's always really fun to see. Is when you have like some really similar opinions and then all of a sudden a super different one. You're like, where did that come from? Like, how are we? I thought we were closely aligned on this preference or something. But yeah.
It really can vary, and that's where there's Andrew. His channel is Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and we used to have like identical taste when we first met, and that's where we met and we became really good friends because we just like all of our favorites were the same, and then we ended up branching like really wildly different directions over the last couple of years. So now it's funny because like half the time I'm like I'm reading a book and I'm like, oh, I love this. This is a new favorite. And then I'll send him a message and be like, hey, guess what book you would hate so much that I love right now? And so like I'll find like a passage I love and send it to him knowing he's gonna hate it. And it's kind of a fun thing that we do sometimes. Which, hey, and it works out. So with totally different stuff. It's a fun time. So that's what makes life interesting. It's different viewpoints for sure. So, with being I know you said a primarily fantasy reader. So, what are some of your favorite fantasy series?
Favorite fantasy series. I really did like Wheel of Time. That was quite a fun one for me. Probably one of my favorite is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I really like, this one's not fantasy, but Red Rising. That was a lot of fun. You laugh. You did.
I hated that series so much. I have friends who are huge fans. So it's just funny that you mentioned that one because I have a friend who it's one of her favorite series, and we always just give each other crap because I know she loves it, she knows I hate it, and so we joke about it. But no, yeah, it's fine. So you get points for Wheel of Time at least, which I was gonna say you can't actually see, but that's up there. So,
there it is.
There's the Wheel of Time.
I also find that it's interesting. I feel like when I read a book has a big impact on my level of how much I enjoy it. And even rereading it later on, I still harken back to maybe that mindset to some degree. And so it's interesting. I think as I grow older, I have new favorites, but so maybe the consistency isn't there, kind of like what you were talking with your friend, how you can branch in different things. It's another one that I really like is it's the Broken Empire series, or the Prince of Thorns is the first book.
Yeah, Yeah, it's actually off screen slightly, but I have that over here. So that's a interesting pick because nobody likes that one.
Really?
It's so unpopular. Like people love Lawrence, but people like the
The
and
red
not everybody, obviously.
Book of the
Yeah,
Ancestor or something?
yep. I was gonna say it's the nun one. I was forgetting, but yeah, that's the one. And like I thought it was fine. I really liked the first two, Broken Empire and then the Red Queen's War. Like those are my favorites that I read from him. But that's most people aren't as big of a fan. So yeah,
Yeah. My favorite is the Broken Empire, and then probably Book of the Ancestors, and then Red Queen's War. For some reason, that one didn't quite hit as well for me, but I did enjoy the Red Queen's War. That was still fun.
I feel like it's because it's the same world and happening about the same time as Broken Empire, but totally polar opposite. So I feel like that
Which
sometimes it
is
just
fun.
doesn't always land. But that's where I ended up. I had fun with it, just being totally opposite. So it ended up working for me. But I
It's a cool
couldn't get
character
into his
idea.
new series.
I love the idea that your main character is like kind of a coward. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah. It was a really fun take, especially when it's like sociopath versus just kind of silly coward guy.
yeah.
It was so very, very different, different viewpoints. So, but I feel like that's a nice range of series. So that's where I was just curious too, because it's always interesting hearing what people's favorite fantasy stuff is too, and I think that's really true about when you read a series too. And there's I've had that where like if I read a series and then I reread it later, and sometimes I appreciate it more. Sometimes maybe I'm like, oh, I remember this being better when I read it. I still need to reread Malazan over here because um, I appreciated the series, but I had a horrible time reading it when I was actually reading it. And so I think I would appreciate it a lot more in my life now than I did 10 years ago when I read it. Uh, it's still one that I want to reread, but I'm a big rereader. I have to do it a little bit less now because I have way too much new stuff to get to. But I really like series that have a lot of rereadability too.
It can be fun too because you like notice foreshadowing that the author put in that like maybe you felt the first time through, but you didn't like catch it and be like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. That could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I love authors who have all that kind of stuff that you catch the second time. You're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize they were putting this all the way here. And so, like, Robert Jordan had a ton of that too. And The Wheel of Time is a series I've reread the most times. And so
That's
there's,
impressive just given its length.
I, I used to read it like constantly when I was younger. I started it really young too, though. And then I would just like interlibrary loan each book from the library like once a year, and I would just go through and do it again. And then I
Nice.
started reading other stuff. But yeah, no, I read it a lot of times. I could have probably been reading many other things at the time. So now every several years or so, I'll maybe do a Wheel of Time reread, but I do it less often now. So. We weren't talking about the Wheel of Time the whole time. I swear.
We diverged. We were just talking about rereading things.
Yeah. I might try the audiobooks for Malison whenever I get to. That'll probably that's a super long series too, so that'll probably help getting through that one as well. Otherwise it would take me forever. So I'll have to see. But yeah. All right. So we're swinging back to you're not quite on the spot here with recommending a book here. So this is your chance. So other than of course The Heretic, which I feel like is a given of the book that you would probably recommend people go check out, which I'll make sure that I don't know if I have a link. I meant to have a link, but I'm going to put a link in the chat right or in the description right now. To the book, but there's your chance to recommend a book. It can be sci-fi, fantasy, whatever it is you want that you think people should check out.
That there's so much pressure on that. I think I'm going to go ahead and recommend The Will of the Many. So if you haven't read that one or if you haven't heard of it, I think it's a fun one to try out. It is fairly popular, so it's not so obscure, but
I can definitely get behind that. So that's I really enjoyed that book myself. So I liked because I think you read his earlier series like Canius too, right?
That is one I started and haven't finished. Now, sometimes what happens with me, I got to disclaimer this one, but again, with Libby, if I don't finish it in time, it goes on the wait list. And if I didn't love it enough, I'm not like, I'm in the middle of another book, I don't always like stop to go back to that one. So I do need to finish that, and I want to, but I haven't finished it. I've read some of it, so I am familiar a little bit with his other work. But
I got you. I mean, Will of the Many is way better. I liked the series, although it was his debut, and it's like Will of the Many is much better, in my opinion. So you've at least read the one that's like is really good. So yeah, I say Will of the Many is behind me somewhere. I just reorganized. Oh, here it is. Aha.
Do you have the new cover, or do you have the original?
I don't. Yeah, it's the original, and now I'm feeling like maybe I should get the new one, but I'll have to see how much it annoys me when the second one comes if I decide I have to do it.
Oh, I can't remember the name of the booktuber that likes to go over covers at the moment, but I always, it's so interesting to look at and kind of evaluate book covers. He has this thing where he talks about like when series like change the style of their cover, even if it's like kind of similar art and like similar titles, but they'll like make it lower or something on the next one. And he's like, it doesn't line up. And I can, as a visual person, that I totally feel the same way often.
Yeah, well, it's irritating when you have that with a series for sure. And this one, I think they didn't want to shell out the money for a cover, and then it ended up blowing up and being very popular. And they're like, "Well, crap, maybe we should shell out for a cover." And so you get that sometimes where it's just you have that, and that's like Tad Williams has gotten hosed a couple of different times on series where he starts out with really cool art, and then they're like, "Yeah, bud, you're not selling enough. We're gonna take away the cool art. You get less cool art now." And so it's
that is unfortunate.
It's sad. I say that happened with his newest series as well, where the second book is one of my favorite covers of all time, and then the third book is just like really plain because it's so sad. But
that's something that's fun about. You would talk about it.
I mean, I would. It's true.
Brian, that's right. But that's one of the fun things about designing your own cover is you can try and make them as nice as you want, and consistent and stuff like that.
That is true.
Not everyone has that opportunity, but it's fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Your cover has like a nice mix because you have like the art, but then you also have some of like the the geometric looking type of stuff, which I feel like is part of the modern type of thing, where it's more that type of stuff. And granted, a lot of people prefer that too. Is the funny thing too. Like I love the classic covers. Like I love the
more
time covers,
painting kind of thing.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't, and they prefer the more minimalist kind of thing. So I feel like you have a nice like in between where it has some of the kind of more modern, less busy, but then you have some of the actual like art in there too. So that's a good mix, I think.
That's kind of fun that you talk about it because that's something I not exactly struggled with, but I like both sides of it a lot. I love kind of painting realistic things and having kind of the full scene, but I also think the geometric is a lot of fun. And so I kind of went back and forth, and I had this weird in between for a while that like really didn't work, where like part of the character's outfit was geometric and part of it was realistic. And people were like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll try to fix that." But that was fun. It's supposed to look like a card a little bit, like a playing card, slightly, but yeah, it's fun because like the H on the top and the bottom.
Yeah, I can see that. So that's it makes sense stylistically there as well too. So yeah. But all right. Well, we're nearing the end here, but again, thanks so much for joining, and definitely people check out. I did put a link in now. I failed to have it in there the whole time, but if you're still watching or watching on the replay, there is a link to the book here now. Also, you can find it pretty easily online with Google and everything as well. Goodreads, Amazon, it's in all of the places. But The Heretic by Nathan Allen. And you can also check out the Star Wars cartoons and all kinds of other stuff that he's done as well. Although I have a feeling you might prefer people check out the book versus watch the TV shows you've worked on. Just a thought, maybe.
I love it when people like the cartoons as well, but it is fun when people can check out the book as well.
Yeah. And so we have a recommendation, and we had life lessons earlier too. So it's been a very well-rounded stream.
And we talked about Wheel of Time, so we covered all the bases.
Yeah, you got to talk about Wheel of Time. I just feel like it's a given. I can always talk about Wheel of Time. We have Heidi has a final question: Han Solo or Luke Skywalker? I don't know why I mispronounced Han Solo either, because that was weird, but
that's funny. Actually, one of the things in Star Wars that we see all the time is pronunciation changes, by different actors saying different things, but also like on the animated side of things, there's like people spell it differently. Like Coruscant is spelled so many different ways in our database. It's kind of funny.
Really?
So, I mean, there's a lot of things like that. But personally, I'd probably choose Han Solo. But yeah.
That's fair. It's fair. It's I'm trying to think. I'd probably lean that way myself too.
I do love a good lightsaber fight, but as a character, I think Han Solo is fun. I like his dialogue.
Yeah, he does have a lot of the great lines, for sure, for sure. With that though, any final thoughts or words of wisdom or advertisements? Whatever you want to close with.
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun to chat, and I also love the community around books in general. Being able to talk about literature and all that kind of stuff, I think is super fun, and I appreciate being able to do that with you today.
Yeah, it's definitely the book community is so much fun to interact with here too, and yeah, it's been fun. I appreciate you coming on here too, and joining early on in the series. And also you did, help kind of give me the push. They're like, man, I really do need to get this series started too. So I'll give you some credit for that, for giving me another nudge. So it's something I'd wanted to actually start, like a series like this, for a while now. So it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks so much for joining, and thanks everybody in the chat or watching on replay for tuning in. And we'll see you next time.